and keeps prices down far more effectively.
As long as suffering of sentient beings remain, I will remain in order to serve.
I imagined God like my grandfather.
In Conversations today, my guest trained as a psychologist. She has published works in more than 14 languages across the world. She's a trained Reiki master, a healer. I'm delighted to welcome Paula Horan. Welcome, Paula.
Thank you.
What is Reiki?
Well, Reiki, quite simply, is universal life force energy. And Reiki, the word Reiki itself, is a Japanese word that means universal life force energy. And the way it's usually used today, Rajiv, is to describe Reiki, the Usui method of natural healing. And that's basically what I've been sharing around the world for the last 12 years.
You know, for the layperson, universal life force energy doesn't quite sort of fall into place. What do you mean by universal life force energy?
Well, it's kind of like quantum physics. You know, it's like in quantum physics, we now know that everything is vibration. There is no solid matter. It's kind of like this floor underneath us. You know, if I look at it under, if I stomp on it, it seems very hard. However, if I look at it under a super electron microscope, we'll see that it's nothing but like space and a few molecules here and there. And it's kind of like the floor is a denser vibration than my physical body. My physical body is a denser vibration than my energy body, but essentially everything is vibration. And so what Reiki, the Usui method of natural healing is a way of giving back to yourself more of what you already are, which is energy.
And has any empirical work been done on validating the effectiveness of Reiki?
Very much so. It's become very popular in the West in the last 20 years. And I know of several people who have done doctoral dissertations now and different studies on it. So yes, there are. And I know in Stanford University they took some pictures of people, you know, just normal Kirlian photography without and then with doing Reiki, and you can see a real difference in the hands, and also using some other forms of instruments. They could actually see that the energy goes in the top of the head and then it goes out the hands. This they can decipher on machines.
But this is something that, you know, mainstream medicine is still uncomfortable with and hasn't quite accepted or recognized.
I think the doctors themselves are becoming very enamored with Reiki. Maybe not so much the pharmaceutical companies, but the doctors themselves are very, very open to it. Because you don't need drugs. Although I shouldn't say that. I mean, you can use Reiki with drugs. It actually, you know, you don't. A lot of people have this idea that if you do Reiki, you shouldn't do, you know, take a medicine or whatever that your doctor has prescribed, and that's not the case at all. It actually can accentuate the efficacy of the drug and eliminate the need for so much. For example, when diabetics use Reiki, they usually find within a few weeks to a few months that they need much less insulin. So it really, you know, as they raise their life force energy, the body begins to take care of itself, and it doesn't need the booster.
So when you say life force energy and using Reiki, what does it mean? How do you use Reiki?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Before I came to Reiki, I had studied many forms of healing. I mean, I had studied acupuncture. I used to do specific types of deep tissue body work like Rolfing, which may not be so familiar with the Indian audience, but Westerners would know about it. Basically, very deep tissue forms of work to help release emotions from the body. So when I came across Reiki and heard about the simple laying on of hands, I was very skeptical. I thought, well, you know, you got to do deep tissue work to really make profound changes. And when I had my first sample treatment, I was just astounded. I could really palpably feel shifts and changes in the energy in my body. And the reason I became so attracted and enamored of Reiki is that the really most beautiful thing about Reiki is that there's this acknowledgement that all healing is pure grace. It's like if I lay my hands on you, because the way Reiki is given is through laying on of hands. If I lay my hands on you to give a treatment, it's like your body will just draw what it needs through the channel, my channel, but I don't do anything. In actual fact, in the giving of Reiki, Reiki is a listening process. I don't do anything, so there's none of my ego involved. It's like your body draws only what it needs. And you can even be skeptical. You don't have to believe in it. You do have to be open to the possibility, but you don't have to believe in it. It's not, it really transcends the mind. This is the beauty of Reiki. You know, it's the mind is too limited for the awesomeness of Reiki, the unlimitedness of Reiki.
Does Reiki then involve a sadhana in the sense that we understand it in India?
Well, this is the beauty of Reiki, is that it's not really a sadhana. Well, this isn't, okay. There are two parallel teachings of Reiki that Dr. Sui taught. One was for Buddhist practitioners, and this other that most of the world uses today is especially for lay practitioners. Now, the roots of Reiki actually come from a very ancient Shingon manuscript, which has its roots all the way to Shakyamuni Buddha. It was brought to Japan in the 8th century and rediscovered by Dr. Sui. It was his inspiration for the teaching of Reiki. And the manuscript is called The Tantra of the Lightning Flash, which heals the body and illumines the mind. And the Buddhist practice basically involves a sort of a Vajrayana type practice of connecting with Medicine King Buddha. But the lay practice is for anyone of any spiritual tradition. They can do it, the first, second, and third degree. And through the first degree empowerments, you're put back in touch with that channel that you've always had with all the energy there is, but have forgotten because your little ego has made you think that you're not good enough or to be in direct connection. And so it removes those veils so that you can then begin to treat yourself and treat others as an added benefit. And at the second degree level, you receive another empowerment, and then you learn 3 symbols to focus the mind so that you can do distant treatments, but most of all, do treatments on yourself to help disengage from identification with the different patterns of the ego. And what happens, you see, in the second degree to a lot of people is they develop a lot of intuitive abilities, sometimes siddhis. And unfortunately, what happens to some people is they're so in awe of this development that then they want to do third degree. But third degree really is only for people who want to teach, and really you should only consider third degree, the teaching level, if you used Reiki for 3 years, because you really need to kind of let go of, disengage from your identification with ego before you do third degree. Otherwise, it can kind of amplify it a lot.
Wouldn't it be fair to say that that perhaps Reiki is now taught in the West and sort of has come back to India in a sense on the rebound from the West, has somewhat been repackaged to make it available and acceptable for people who want instant solutions. In India, we like to believe that to acquire these powers and to achieve the sensitivity to be in tune with the larger cosmic forces takes a lifetime of practice, and it seems to be promised here in a weekend.
Well, Rajiv, it's like both are equally true. You're absolutely correct. And, and this is something that people doing Reiki need to understand, is that when you seek out a Reiki teacher, you should look for someone who's practiced at least a minimum of 3 years. We have these fly-by-night things I see happening all over India, like in the West. People teaching first and second degree in one weekend and third degree the next, And how can you be a teacher in a week if you haven't even... First degree really needs to be taught in a minimum of 2 days. And then you need to imbibe it, do it for 3 to 6 months before you consider second degree, if you choose to go to that level. And then you need to use that for 3 years to imbibe it fully before you go to the teaching level.
Does Reiki have a moral, ethical framework like the yamas and niyamas, sort of in the ladder that we have in the Indian traditions?
In the Buddhist parallel teaching, there are a whole number of precepts. However, for the lay practice, there are 5 principles, very simple principles that actually came from the Meiji Emperor. that Asui adopted, which really profoundly helped people. I used them myself for years. The first one being, just for today, I will be in the attitude of gratitude. And of course, as soon as you're in the attitude of gratitude for everything you have, you continue to be in the state of have and not in lack. So it's very practical. Then, just for today, I will not worry. This leads one to look in and contemplate, what is there to be worried about? Who is there to be worried? And then, just for today, I will not anger. Now, this one does not mean, by the way, we should suppress anger. You know, if anger arises, feel it fully. Don't suppress it, make it stronger. But it helps you to look at who is it that's angry? You know, it's only the ego that gets angry, right? And then, just for today, I will show love and respect for all sentient beings. And what's the other one? Just for today, I'll be in truth for myself, with myself, or I will do my work honestly. That's kind of the Japanese version of I will be in truth with myself. And so what I always encourage my students is to like focus on one of these each week and just really go deep into it. And it's very contemplative, that Reiki is actually. And the use of it, it's so simple. It is easy for us in our busy world today because, for example, the way I use it is I just treat myself each evening as I'm going to sleep. I usually get about to my throat or my heart, and I fall asleep. So when I wake up, I start with my heart, keep going, sit up, do my knees, my feet, my back, and you start, you complete your day in silence, and you begin in silence. So it's really beautiful in that way.
You've had a guru in Lucknow who you worked with for many years. Was he involved in Reiki?
Not at all.
So what sort of routes has your quest taken? You started as a sort of student of psychology, and then what happened?
Sure. I mean, like a lot of psychologists, I wanted to figure out my mind and how to get out of suffering. I think all of us want to end our suffering, like the Buddha said, or Mahavira, any of the great masters, Jesus. It was a quest for self-knowledge, and naturally anyone who delves into psychology long enough will find that the answer doesn't lie in psychology, it's beyond that. As Buddha himself found, you know, like India had such a strong culture at the time of Mahavira and Buddha. You know, everybody was really highly educated in the Indus River Valley, and you know, their intellect was developed, so it was just an appropriate time to take the next step beyond the intellect. And that's where many of us are today. You know, we've come to a point where it's like we know the intellect does not dissolve our suffering. We have to take the next step. And so, you know, psychology, I got my doctorate in it, and then, you know, I proved I could think logically, right? But that doesn't make you happy either. And it's really in giving up the mind. And I had the most beautiful Reiki master, Kate Nani, who helped me in a lot of ways. And then, of course, you know, they say when the student is ready, the master appears, and so did H.W.L. Punja. He was one of the closest disciples of Ramana Maharshi. He became realized at 34. He was a Punjabi. He died a year ago, and I had the great blessing to be with him for 5 years, and yeah, really go into silence in his presence. It was really beautiful.
So what sort of practice and teachings did you go through to arrive at where you are today?
Reiki was my form of spiritual practice, and what I learned from, you know, the kind of people that came to H.W.L. Punja were the people who'd done sadhana for 30, 40 years. And you'd get to him, he'd say, who wants to do sadhana? Drop all sadhana. You know, it's like, because it's the last thing to go is the one who wants to get enlightened.
Right.
You know, that's the one in the way. And yet, to get to that point, most people do need sadhana. And one of the things I've been very attracted to in my life is the Vajrayana practices, because, you know, you're also generating the deity so that you become the deity. You know, my interest is really in Tibetan Buddhism. I'm very attracted to Dzogchen, the non-dual aspect, and in the Hindu tradition, I've been very attracted to Advaita Vedanta and Vichar, direct self-inquiry. And so this is, if you could say, what's my main sadhana? It's Vichar. It's like, who's angry? Me. Me who? The one who wants it done this way. Oh yeah, and who's that? You know, you just keep taking it inward until finally the mind shuts up and you're just in the peace of who you are.
But you know, the use of the deity in the Vajrayana tradition in Buddhism, you know, in terms of the choice of the deity and the associations that the deity has, are extremely culture specific. How do you make the leap, the jump?
Well, I guess I've had a real gift from the time my father was worked for the military. And so I grew up traveling every 3 years. I grew up in many different countries. So I'm not cultural specific person. And what I found out, I had one of these Briga readings here in India where I found out that, you know, I have a long, long connection with India, put it that way, and especially Advaita Vedanta, and also with the Tibetan tradition. So it's no accident that I'm here, and that I was meant to come back and share the deepest Indian traditions in a Western package, because too many Indians today have forgotten their own incredible heritage, and they want everything from the West, and are focused on the materialism, kind of the way we were in America in the 50s. And so here in India, people are getting into a lot of stress as a result of not focusing on what's really important anymore. So my own master made it clear that my job is to help give back to India the gift it gave to me. And that's why I'm so attracted, not just for that, but I love India.
What is it about India that you find so attractive? I think sort of a lot of educated Indians are despairing about the chaos in India. What do you find so attractive?
I love the chaos! I'll tell you why. Because in America, it's so sad now. Most people have become indentured servants to the banks. They're in suffering. It's not like what you see on TV, on CNN or the BBC. It doesn't show an accurate picture. People are really suffering in the West, and they feel so dispossessed. And I see Western culture coming in here, and people are thinking it's so great and fantastic. Well, I'd say to most Indians, just really hang out in the West for about 6 months, really, and check it out. You may feel really different. And what's so beautiful about that India still has this deep silence inside her. Like, for example, I just led a seminar near Vrindavan, and I went back there because there's just this beautiful silence there in Vrindavan, in Sevakunj and in Banka Bihari, and in so many places. I mean, when I land on a plane in Delhi or Bombay, I just want to kiss the ground to be back in India, where it's still this peace. Because within this chaos in India is this incredible peace. And quite frankly, it's the chaos of India which is keeping India safe still from some of the trends that are happening in the West right now that are pretty, I don't want to put limits on it, not nice.
So when you say repackage this, in what ways do you change it or adapt it or modify it to make it available and accessible to the kind of people you're reaching out to?
Yeah, that's one of the gifts of the West, is taking the Eastern traditions and putting them in such a way. This is what Takata did, basically. What's coming out now is Takata put it in 3 simple levels, for the lay practice, that is, of Reiki, so that it could be easily disseminated to many, many people. Whereas we're finding out now that this Japanese lay practice has gone on all the way along. We're just finally finding the roots, and they have levels 9 through 1, and you start at level 9, and the highest level is actually level 1. But if you follow it, it's basically the same things that Takata taught, only working more closely with the teacher all the time. But that's not practical in today's world, because we have 9-to-5 jobs and so on and so forth.
So in this sort of this repackaged Reiki, is this in some way less effective, less intense, less powerful than
Not at all. Not as long as you have the proper attunements. If you receive the proper attunements from someone in a direct lineage with a Sui.
So attunements are sort of like the initiation that we would have in India, a transmission.
Exactly. The direct transmission from a teacher who's really taken the time to imbibe it, who has the real essence, who carries the essence.
So what is it that gets transmitted? What is the transmission that takes place? Why can't it just be picked up from a book?
It's the absolutely good question. It's the mustard seed of, you could say, like the mustard seed of the element from a realized being that's carried along. And as I say, it should only be trained, people should only be trained to teach who've really used Reiki, so they really imbibed it fully. it's kind of like when you do Vajrayana practices, it takes a time. You have to do them for a while so that you begin to generate the energy, that
Not just
energy.
time, that takes lifetimes. And you think in eons.
And yes and no. What my master here taught me is that you can get it in a millisecond. However, it's
you
true,
might
the
not.
vessel must be receptive.
Through
And that's the
lifetimes of
practice.
karma.
Right.
Yes.
So, some are ready for that, and Reiki can be one of those vehicles, absolutely. And the empowerments of first degree, they take only 2 days to give. They should never be given in a day, by the way. They need at least a minimum of 24 hours between the second and third, although it's even good sometimes to teach it 1 attunement per day over 4 days. But it's really important that you do receive the attunements from somebody in the direct lineage of a Sui. And so, anybody who's interested in Reiki...
Well, why is it important? In the sense that you've had, other techniques like transcendental meditation and what have you,
for example,
where it's transmitted very openly and easily and accessibly. And why is this relationship so important in Reiki?
It's no different than in TM. TM, you get an empowerment from someone who has reached a certain level of maturity. From I've never done TM, but it's my understanding you also get your own personal secret mantra and so on, or whatever. But Reiki is really no different from any of the Tibetan traditions. If you go to a Lama for an empowerment, you receive a certain teaching. And you see, it's like that empowerment.
But you can't go to a Tibetan Lama and just ask for a teaching. If he's a serious, evolved Lama, he's going to evaluate you to figure out whether you're prepared for the teaching, whether you're worthy, and then he takes on your karma, and it's a long, intense relationship.
Exactly, good point. And it's the same with Reiki. You see, anybody can receive first degree. It's kind of like in the Tibetan tradition. Anybody can do the basic level and begin the Nigandro, where you do all the 100,000s of everything, okay? First degree, that's how first degree is. I evaluate the people who've done second degree. I have requirements. They have to have done third degree, they have to have used first degree for a minimum of 3 to 6 months. And sometimes, rarely, I'll make an exception to the rule. There are some people I will occasionally do if they've done at least the 3 weeks, been through the 3-week cleanse process, and I know I won't see them again in this lifetime or something like that, and I feel they're really worthy, yes, I will do it.
The Buddha also taught that it was very important for you to sort of scrutinize and evaluate your teacher. And there are very clear guidelines as to the yardsticks that you should use. And also said that if there was a conflict between your reason and what the teaching was, that you follow your reason and your experience.
Absolutely.
What are the yardsticks that you would use to look at a Reiki teacher?
There's
an ad in the newspaper every day.
Right. Number one, you ask them, how long have you been a Reiki master? How long have you done Reiki before you became a Reiki master? And especially people who want to train as Reiki masters. Has that person done Reiki, been a Reiki master for 3 years? Any of my Reiki master trainees, they must be a Reiki master for 3 years themselves.
Why 3 years? I mean, what's the significance of 3 years?
And actually sometimes longer. 3 years of teaching a lot of first and second degree, because different things happen to people after first and second degree. And you need to be witness to this so that when you train another teacher yourself, you have some experience behind you.
No, I just meant, is there sort of, like you have the significance of the number 9 or 108, is there a significance to the 3 years, or is that...
It's what we have seen is, it takes about 3 years to fully imbibe Reiki and learn enough so that you can transfer it on. Takata didn't leave us a lot of guidelines in this. Many of us who are the older Reiki masters from her tradition, she's the main one who's spread the lay practice. She died in 1980. It's been almost 20 years since her passing. And she trained only 20 masters, and they were total novices themselves when she left her body. And so we kind of had to learn on our own a lot. And so many of us made mistakes and trained people too early and learned later what we'd done wrong.
Right. The Vajrayana tradition of Buddhism derives from the Mahayana tradition, and where the objective is really to be a bodhisattva ultimately and to serve and treat other people. Is this your guiding principle, and how far and where do you see the rest of your life taking you?
Well, it's something that comes naturally from inside. And yeah, to be truthful, I've taken the Bodhisattva vow, but it really just comes from, it's what I enjoy. I love people. I love sharing with people. It's very natural. It's funny, because a few years ago I tried to quit teaching, you know. It's like I thought, I want to do something else. I want to make sure my ego wasn't hooked in being a teacher, because what's most important to me is really non-attachment. Of course, then finally I learned you got to even drop your attachment to being detached.
That's right.
But one day I did really attempt giving up teaching, and then I finally realized that no, this is my gift. It comes from inside. I mean, it's like I can't help but do it. And then, you know, it just comes out of me without trying. It just is. There's no one here doing anything. This is what Punjaji helped me to see, or Papaji, is that there's no one here doing anything. It's really all just happening.
Great. Thank you very much. That's been a great pleasure.
Thank you.